The final thing I want to talk about is the more dark sides of entrepreneurship, or the downsides that people can actually feel or be exposed to when they engage in the entrepreneurial process. Because entrepreneurship is not an easy space to be in, and from time to time, it does happen that there are negative impacts upon the individual and their families who are engaged in entrepreneurial activity. So there are sort of three broad areas of three broad negative aspects that might be associated with the dark side of entrepreneurship. The first negative aspect is the risk that entrepreneurs face. Entrepreneurs face a range of financial risks. They're often putting their own money on the line when they're starting off their business, and if the business doesn't work out, then that money is lost. They might borrow money, which means that they have huge financial debts, which could lead them going into bankruptcy. There's also the opportunity cost that they're not out earning money through other forms of employment. So while they're spending all their time investing on starting this business, they're missing opportunities to earn revenue from other sources. There are career risks. So people often go from having regular, standard, normal jobs to engaging in entrepreneurial activity. And that might mean that they sit outside the labour market for a period of time, 2, 3, 5 years. If the entrepreneurial venture doesn't work, if there's problems with that entrepreneurial activity and they have to return to the labour market, then the labour market might have moved on, might have left them behind. And so the consequence of that is they may find it difficult to re-enter the standard employment marketplace because their experiences are not valid in the normal work organisation. So again, there's a certain career risk there. There are often social risks associated with being engaged in entrepreneurial activity. You have to dedicate a lot of time and effort to your business. You don't have time to spend on the other aspects of life. You have to spend a lot of time networking, which means you have to interact with a lot of people that, on a personal level, you mightn't necessarily like very much. There's also psychic risk in the sense that we might experience psychological burnout and stress from engaging in the entrepreneurial activities. It's tiring, can be physically draining as well. There can be quite negative health impacts from being engaged in entrepreneurial activities, particularly working long hours with very little sleep. So the risks associated with entrepreneurship are quite high. We also know there are issues associated with stress and burnout. As I mentioned before, entrepreneurship is a very stressful process. You're giving up so much of your life to pursue one dedicated opportunity for a period of time. And the pressure to be successful, to provide for yourself and your family, can often be a little bit overwhelming for people. And so therefore there is a real chance that you'll have high levels of stress. And if that stress goes on for extended periods of time, that can actually lead to burnout. So if people find themselves in high pressure situations without the time to take holidays and breaks and periods of leave from the workforce, then that can actually burn them out both physically and emotionally. And we also need to think about the impact that entrepreneurship can have on people's egos. Entrepreneurs tend to have very high levels of need for control, and so because of that they tend to become control freaks, which means it's often difficult for them to form relationships with other people around them. If you look at the history of Steve Jobs and his time at Apple, he had very, very fractious relationships with many of the staff that he worked with because they simply couldn't trust him for extended periods of time. Often entrepreneurs have a sense of distrust because they're coming up with something new and secretive. They often are fearful that other people are going to copy their ideas. And so that does tend to lead them to distrust other people and to be always on the lookout for where they perceive people are trying to rob them of their ideas. Entrepreneurs often have a very high need for success, and if the business doesn't end up being successful, that can lead to very negative feelings and can often lead to the people becoming very stressed and again burnt out. And also entrepreneurs can have very unrealistic optimism. Often they become so positive about their ideas, so fixated on their ideas being right, that they often don't listen to impartial external advice that tells them that their idea is not actually as good as they think it is. And so, again, when we're dealing with entrepreneurship, we need to be aware that entrepreneurship does have this downside, does have these negative aspects to it. And unless we manage these effectively, we're going to struggle to be successful as an entrepreneur.